I'm Ron Duncan Hart of the Santa Fe Distinguished Lecture Series, and we'd like to welcome you today to this talk by Professor Shalom Sabar, who's a world authority on Jewish jewelry and magic. And I'd like to remind you that Professor Sabar has another talk on a subject of considerable contemporary interest, Moroccan Jews in Israel. It is my pleasure now to turn it over to Dr. Doris Frances Earhart, who will introduce Professor Sabar. Dr. Frances edited the book Faith and Transformation that is on the Girard Amulet collection in the Museum of International Folk Art. Dr. Frances.
It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Shalom Sabar, already known to many of you from his 2018 talk on Rembrandt and the Jews. Professor Sabar received his PhD in art history from UCLA and is professor at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. The author of over 200 publications, his research merges the disciplines of art history and folklore, highlighting the folk nature of Jewish art and material culture, particularly those ritual objects associated with life cycle events. Professor Sabar was born in Zakko, an ancient Kurdish Jewish community in northern Iraq, a town with a 2,700-year-old history. He was the last Jewish child born and circumcised in Zakko. Soon afterward, his family migrated to Israel as part of the Iraqi exodus of Jews, joining the massive ingathering of exiles from Arab-speaking lands to the new state of Israel. Included among the scant belongings of these immigrants were silver amulets, treasured for their efficacy, passed down among families, but never sold. Professor Sabar grew up speaking Aramaic, the language of Zakko, and also the ancient language of the Babylonian Talmud and the Zohar, undoubtedly contributing to his unique insights into the ancient mystical beliefs and mores underlying this world of amulets and magical solutions. Initially, Israeli Ashkenazi scholars denigrated these Arab land amulets as merely superstition, but later, with the pioneering work of the Ben-Zivi Institute, the ethnographic exhibitions of the Israel Museum, and the writings of Professor Sabar, there is now a reevaluation of the culture of these Islamic Jewish communities. The rich legacy of Jews from Arab lands, including their jewelry and amulets, is finally being valued, preserved, and integrated into mainstream Jewish history. Professor Sabar has also written extensively on the cultural and artistic interrelationships between Jewish minority communities and their Christian and Islamic hosts. The amulet display at Santa Fe's Museum of International Folk Art, collected from many of these Catholic and Islamic host countries, reveals common themes and motifs shared with the Jewish amulets from Arab lands. For example, symbolic hands, the hands of Fatima from Morocco, blue beads from Turkey to ward off the evil eye, amuletic jewelry from Iran, incised with esoteric text, or Greek representations for protection of mother and infant in childbed. It is now my honor to present Professor Sabar, who will tell us about these fragile, ephemeral objects in the culture of Jews from Arab lands. Professor Sabar.
Thank you so much for this lovely introduction. I'm amazed, I must say. Good morning to you and good evening to the Israelis who join us. The topic of the lecture, as you heard in such a detail already, is about magic and amulets of the Jews in Islamic lands. I should begin with telling that really there's not much big difference in the traditions and beliefs of the Jews of Islamic lands to those of Poland or Germany and Italy. but in this lecture, we will concentrate only on the lens of Islam. Okay, so I want to begin with some introduction about magic and some concepts we might have, and to see where Judaism fits in. When we think of witch doctors or magicians that perform all kind of acts that supposed to change nature and influence our life in a way that is supernatural, we usually think of primitive people in quotation marks that look like this and wear all kind of strange and bizarre items that if you are not part of the group, you won't understand what it is and what it means. Even in modern times, these pictures that I showed you are from early 20th century. These are more modern, more recent, and they still show this kind of men dressed in and colored in all strange ways and wearing masks or using many items that are not really clear to those who are not part of the group, or even those who are part of the group. They cannot rely on what these items can do, or only this man would know how to do this. And in the West, also the approach to magic, especially because of the church, because of Christianity, was very negative. I mean, it was often associated with witchcraft, with something that belongs to the devil, to demons, to other powers of the world that are not the good ones, the bad ones. Usually and very often, women were accused of doing witchcraft and doing magic that is bad, you can say, in Western tradition, and we know that very well. The reason is very simple, because women were considered closer to nature than men. I mean, they have a cycle like nature, that they get pregnant, they bear children, they are controlled by nature, supposedly, while men control culture. So women were often accused of, let's say, collaborating with nature to change the destiny of women, usually for evil. So we know this kind of images in European tradition since late antiquity and on, especially in the Middle Ages and early modern period, like those that we see here. These witches that are doing all kind of incantations and so on, preparing something evil. And this has been part of European tradition for centuries. Yes, the Kingdom of Darkness, this book is called, the history of people who deal with this kind of let's say, acts that are connected with the demons and the devils that are not really the way a good Christian should behave. And so in these books, we'll have usually demons in the company of women. Yes, I mean, that's very common image to see, and everyone who read a little bit about witchcraft and know about this will understand these images immediately. This actually goes back to even before Christianity, to the pagan world, when we have women that are, let's say, those in power to know the future, to tell things about our lives that others cannot know, because again, they know the secret of nature in a way that men cannot know. It's not something in the books, it's something in their nature, inherent in their nature, that they can tell. So the oracle in ancient Greece was a woman that could tell, all kind of things that they would come to consult her to see what will happen and so on. In Judaism, the first time that we hear about this occupation in quotation mark is again in the context of women. The first time that something about this topic appears specifically in the Bible is in the book of Exodus, as we read in chapter 22, many commandments that are given to Moses, they're all directed to men, except one verse, the last that I'm showing you here, in Hebrew, "Mechashefa lo techayeh," thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. I mean, referring to a female witch, of course, and not to men. I mean, now it's like obvious to the lawgiver in biblical times that these are women who are doing these evil things also, and they should not be tolerated or be part of the Jewish people as well, like we saw a second ago about Christianity. Even more so, the biblical lawgiver gives a list of what kind of magic is forbidden, actually almost anything that was known in antiquity. The list, let me skip this for a second. Oh, okay, I see that one thing, 1 second, let me show you the list and then I'll go back. Okay, so I'm sorry for this. Okay, I'll come back to this. I see the slides have been reversed a little bit. So this verse from the book of Deuteronomy, which gives us a list of what is not allowed to be done when you enter the Holy Land. Yes, I mean, these verses are supposedly given before the Israelites entered the Holy Land. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices his son or daughter in the fire, practices divination, conjury, interpreted omens, practices sorcery, cast spells. For those who can read the Hebrew, here is the Hebrew verse to see what are all these words, what they say. Consults a medium or inquires of the dead. Here we have a list of 6 or 7 practices of magicians in antiquity that are all forbidden according to the biblical lawgiver. Yes, I mean, so it's very clear that also in Judaism of antiquity, this was considered pagan, pagan kind of practices, idolatry, and so on. Even more so, I'll just give you 2 more examples from the Pentateuch, from the Torah. In the book of Leviticus, if a person turns to mediums and necromancers, I hope I'm pronouncing this word correctly, whoring after them, I will set my face against that person and will cut him off from among his people. In the book of Numbers, we read, for there is no enchantment against Jacob, no divination against Israel. Yes, I mean, that like meaning, that's how the rabbis of old understood this, that the Jewish people is not subject to anything that's connected with magic or divination or anything of this type. It's not part of our tradition. It's only of the pagan world. So having said that, so how do we have magic in Jewish tradition, and why is my lecture here today? Because this will seem to, let's say, take away everything that we know or believe. Why there was still the production of amulets and magic, and what kind of magic there was in Jewish tradition in the past or even the present. So when we look at a little bit about the art still of the antiquity and then go back to our times, we can see, I show it through illumination, but of course you can read the stories in the Bible. What the rabbis will tell you. They will tell you, if you read the Torah very carefully, you'll see it's not really divination, it's not magic. So for example, let's look at the Haggadah we just read a few days ago. And there is the story of the 10 plagues of Egypt, the many miracles that happened, starting with one that everybody knows. I'm showing you the Golden Haggadah from medieval Spain that shows the life of Moses in pictures. And there is one picture that opens the story of the miracles, you can say, when Moses and Aaron are here in front of Pharaoh, and they are performing this, you can say, magical tricks, if you want. Yes, I mean, we see that everyone, yes, the story is told in Exodus. So Moses and Aaron came to Pharaoh and did just as the Lord has commanded them. Aaron casted down his rod and it turned into a serpent. So here's a really practical magic, you can say, something that any magician can do to this day. Then Pharaoh summoned the wise men, the Khartoumim, yes, his magicians, and the Egyptian magicians in turn did the same with their spells. Each cast down his rod, and they turned them into serpents. But Aaron's rods swallowed the rods. This is what we see here, the rod of Aaron swallowing the others. Like as if the story that is told here, Aaron was a better magician than the Egyptian magicians. That's what you can conclude. Of course, this is not the way this is understood by the rabbis. And the proof is another story that is very well known, and it's connected directly to the field of medicine. And this is the story of the brazen serpent that is told again in the Pentateuch. Remember the story that people there was a plague, and Moses was looking for some kind of help, and is commanded to make a three-dimensional object of an animal that anyone who looks at it can be cured. So here we see this picture that is supposedly depicting this event as if it happened in the past. Of course, it's the imagination of an artist, but we see Moses here pointing, and all these sick people, when they look at the serpent, they are getting healed. So the rabbis, of course, knew the story very well, and they asked themselves, like the story that we just saw about Moses and the plagues of Egypt and Moses and the magicians. So they asked themselves, can a serpent make someone be better and medically? Can he be alive because he looks at the serpent? What does it mean? No, of course it means that the serpent cannot heal. It means that when you look up and you think about your Father in heaven, then you will be cured. So this is in a nutshell the basic approach of Judaism to magic. It's not the object that we use or the text that we write, it's because of our belief in God. And if you believe, and if there is someone who knows how to do it, and he is closer to God, you can say he can do it better. Of course, we have to take this as cultural historians in, with a little caution, because the selection in the story here of the brazen serpent is not by accident, because in antiquity, the serpent was believed to have medical powers. Is, for example, the emblem of Asclepius, the god of medicine, yes, like we see here in ancient Greece, because the serpent can take his skin when it peels off, it can come alive again, and or he has a venom that can maybe produce something good as well, like, is very strong and so on. So people believed in the powers of serpents. We won't go into this now, but anyway, until today we believe in that. Yes, until today you have the serpent as an emblem of medical corps and in different countries and so on, whether in the US or in Israel. Yes, so here's the army, the medical unit of the army in Israel that has the serpent to this day, because they believe in that powers. So of course the selection of the serpent in the story is not just by accident, but still the rabbis did not want to say this is because of the power of the serpent that we can do it, but because of the belief in God. So the practitioners of magic in Judaism are not witch doctors, are not witches, are not women, but are usually, and now I go back I apologize to the slide that I skipped, are rabbinical figures. These are the persons who are closest to God or to the tradition or to the word of God in our tradition. So we believe, and this I'm showing you a Yemenite, a Moroccan rabbi, we believe that these people, because of their learning, because of their, let's say, knowledge, because of their the practice, whatever God wants them in the best way, they are closer to God and they can do it on our behalf. So usually the practitioners, you can say, of magic in Judaism were rabbis in most cases, male rabbis, of course, that are knowing the books very well. I mean, this like Moroccan rabbi has the book that he can read the secrets, or if he's a silversmith and like this Yemenite silversmith, he can produce amulets made of silver or other precious metals. So these are like the two main, can say, fields of production of amulets in Judaism are either paper and parchment written, or jewelry, or items of silver and precious metals. So this, of course, any rabbi can do it, but there are those who are better than others. Those who, let's say, who are closer to God, and they become to be known as tzaddikim, as the tzaddik, whether in Eastern Europe or tzaddik in Morocco, and or in North Africa in general. Here we see, for example, one such historical figure, Rabbi Ephraim al-Nakawa. He was born in Toledo in Spain and moves to Algeria, where he becomes a famous rabbi, and he lives in the 14th and 15th century, and he becomes very well known as someone who can provide medicine on many dangerous cases, like the daughter of the Sultan, or they can perform miracles. He controlled the lion. The lion actually kept him in the forest while he was celebrating Shabbat, and many stories are told about him. And you see the title of this postcard that we see here. This, by the way, is tombstone in Tlemcen in Algiers. It says here, Baal HaNissim, that he is owner, you can say, or the worker of miracles. So he became well known for that. So that's a historical figure of centuries ago. In the same way, there are more recent rabbis in our time, you can say the 20th century, like these three guys. This is actually taken from a Moroccan amulet. I won't speak about the three of them now, but the one in the center is the same family of the rabbi that we saw a second ago. And this is Raphael al-Nakawa, born in Saleh in Morocco, the first chief rabbi of all Morocco. He died in 1935, and he became to be known as a sort of a miracle worker, or his name was given, the name that was, let's say, his nickname is Hamalach Raphael, the angel Raphael. And we remember that the word Raphael means that the angel that can cure, is like the angel nominated on medicine. Yes, for like lerapeh, yes, in Hebrew. So here is this rabbi that's here in the center. And just I want to show you books, for example, this book that is written on him here in Israel, Or HaMerapeh. It's a book about the medicine that he can do. I mean, this rabbi that, died in our time and was venerated. Or here's another tzaddik that is maybe number 2 in the cult of tzaddikim in Morocco, Amram ben Diwan of Wazan. And this book that I'm showing you is all filled with stories of his miracles, of what this rabbi could have done. He lived in the 18th century. He died in Morocco. He was probably from Eretz Israel, but the story is not so important now. But anyway, these kind of people, because of their, let's say, righteousness, they are closer to God and they can produce these items that we are looking for. Okay, now we can go back to, I'm sorry, to this. Okay, so, and of course, this tradition is known already from the Talmudic period. And again, we have the parallel in pagan world. For example, I'm showing you here this painting just to illustrate something that is well known in magic practices. Is the magician creates his own space, you can say, where he performs the magic. So here's this woman that is, again, sort of a witch, making the magic circle, as it's called, to make the space in which she's going to practice her things with the fire in the center and so on. We have the same story about the rabbi. A rabbi, Chonia Meagel, is this rabbi, Talmudic rabbi, that the story is told, and I think many of you know it, that he made a circle and he told God, I'm not moving from this circle until you make rain. And the rain really came. So we see the rain coming. If you want, you can read the story in the Mishnah, in Tractate Ta'anit, of how this man stands in the center of the circle and says, I take an oath by your great name that I will not move from here until you have mercy upon your children, and answer the prayer for rain, and rain began to trickle down. So that's the story, and is venerated to this day. This is tomb is a site in the Galilee in Israel, yes, of the Tanakh Chonia Me'agel. So stories like this are told about these people because, in the story in the Mishnah here that I just read to you, it emphasizes that Chonia Me'agel spoke directly with God, and that's how he was able to change the laws of nature, to make the rain fall in the season that it was not supposed to. So actually, the oldest Jewish text of the Bible that we have in our hands is this one. Is an amulet that was discovered in Jerusalem, not far from Mount Zion of today, in this cave, just behind the Scottish church, those of you know Jerusalem. It's from the first temple period. It was a silver cylinder, very tiny, that this is now how it is when it was open. This is the architect who discovered it, Gabriel Barkai. And when it was opened, what is written on it is the priestly blessing. Think about the priestly blessing for a second and see what it says. The Lord bless you and protect you. Yes, and so on. Read the rest of it and you understand why this is very important text, and this is the oldest, as I said, text of the Bible that we have in our hands, and how this was used. When this was rolled, this was a small piece of silver. Today in the Israel Museum, how was it used? It was hanging on the neck of someone, walking with it as for protection on the neck. So these two images are from ancient Egypt and ancient Rome. And this figure here, you see on his neck, he has this item, and here is this item like our silver cylinder that was discovered. And this, the Roman man is wearing this, also an amulet. So you put it next to your body. Actually, the word kamea in Hebrew for amulet or talisman means something that is close to your body, that you put on your body. It's a small item you put to protect you with the names of gods or God that is written on it. So this practice, after all this introduction, we can now jump several almost 2,000 years later to the 19th century, is still almost unchangeable in the way that was practiced in the lands of Islam. These are all Jewish women or girls that are wearing in the same way an amulet around their neck, yes, with a cylinder here, inside of which there would be a piece of paper or parchment, and we'll see later what could be written on it. So you can see how this was done and this kind of items, and you can see how they would look like, of course, and you can open them and put inside like the Birkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing we saw a second ago. So the oldest pictures that we have, for example, from Iran, that were taken of Jews, that were taken in the second half of the 19th century, when travelers from the West came to visit. This is the one on the left that I'm showing you. This woman from 1870 or so has this item where she's wearing. And you will look at these pictures, you'll always see this kind of items that they are wearing on them, that they are part of their appearance. So this is 1870, this is 1951. This woman is just arriving in Israel from Kurdistan, actually from my hometown, from Zacho, and she is also wearing something on her chest here. And this is the item that she's wearing from the collection of William Gross, who I think is with us. And you can see here, this item that she's wearing is a piece of jewelry upon which is written in large letters the name of God, what we call Hashem Amforash, Yudei Vave, and after it, Shaddai. And then it says Beshem. When it begins with the word Beshem, it meaning in the name of. and like you make the God in all its appearances, in all the possibilities that he shows himself, he reveals himself to human, are written here so that he can protect. This woman would not be able to read what it says, even if she knew to read and write. Usually they didn't know, but the fact that it was written by a tzaddik, by a chacham, by a learned man, it's for her protection. It's also written in Hebrew, of course, that's even more important, and it ends with this line, Shaddai leshmirat nokza. This amulet that is called Shaddai, after the name of God, is to protect nosek kameh, the person who is wearing this amulet. And by the way, you can say from psychological or social point of view, she feels safer when she walks with this because she knows she has it on her chest. So if she walks with this around, she is protected, and because the Chacham gave her this, and she knows he has powers, it's closer to God. She's ignorant, she does not to read and write, as I said, but he knows the prayers, and the names that is written here will be protection for her. So we can, when we look at jewelry of the past, whether Islamic or Jewish, it doesn't really matter for this question now. It has many purposes. I decided to list for you five, the most principal, the most important one, the five. These are all, by the way, Jewish amulets that we are looking at. So the first one, and actually I'm going chronologically, what scholars, what anthropologists think, how jewelry came to be in part of human society from the remote past to our times. So the oldest actually element is protection. That's what, like here, by the way, like the clothes that we wear, the costumes are probably for protection and against evil forces, not against the weather. So magic is really the primary reason in the past for using jewelry. The second one is it's a status symbol. I mean, once you wear gold or silver, and how much of it you put on yourself shows who you are. Immediately, the people around you can say who you are. For women especially, sometimes this was everything that she had. Everything that she can handle and had personally that was her own possession was the jewelry that she wore, because everything else belonged officially, according to the law, to her husband. This can be part of the dowry that she brought with her, and this will be her personal possession. Like one anthropologist defined it, a woman in the past in Islamic lands was a walking bank. This is like what she is, this is her life that she carries on her. Also, of course, it's you can tell immediately from which group this person comes, whether it's ethnic group or a religious one. And only the last one is for beautification. And actually, the order today is, you can say, is the reverse order, more or less. I mean, magic today is not so important for jewelry, while for the beautification of the person who wear the jewelry is the most important reason for wearing them in our time. Okay, so when we look now at images, as I said, I'm looking at images wherever I can find them of how Jewish women in particular looked in the past in Islamic lands and other places. In North Africa, we have the lack of the Orientalist artists, the French Orientalist artists that came to Morocco and did wonderful paintings. I'm just showing you one of among the many that we have, one by Delacroix, and there are many other artists who painted the Jewish women because, by the way, they liked to paint them. They were they did not cover their face. It was possible to see all their jewelry, all their costumes, how they look like, unlike the Muslim women that were not willing to cooperate in most cases. So the Jewish women, especially the Sephardi ones, were very open to do that. So that's how we have these wonderful images. But anyway, the reason I'm showing this is because of the jewelry. Again, I mean, you see that when she sits in front of the artist, she would put all her jewelry on. This is her personal jewelry. And then we have the French postcards. Again, the French, I mean, the postcards that the colonialist French did in late 19th, early 20th century, like this lovely woman from Debdu, from the city of Debdu in the Atlas Mountains. And here are two more from Debdu, from the same city. And we can see the typical jewelry that today you can see in any museum of Judaica or Moroccan artifacts, if you want to look for them. And so I'm showing this too because she's wearing here and here an item that has a shape of a triangle. So we might think it's a beautiful one, it's attractive and so on. But if we go back to, let's say, the beginning of this phenomenon and study it and see this is not by chance that she's wearing a triangle and that it's in this shape that is it is wide at top and going and narrow towards the bottom. Here is how this item would look like. And of course, we can know sometimes if we have an old one that is a piece of jewelry that it would have, for example, a fish on it here, okay? So what? I'll show you, let's say, I'll show you the Jewish sources for it. Here is a book that was published for the first time in Amsterdam, 1701. It's a book of recipes, magical recipes. It's called Sefer Raziel HaMalach, the book of Raziel the angel. Raziel is the angel nominated on secrets. Raz means in Hebrew secret, and so is the angel nominated on secret, and he reveals them to human beings. So this book is known from antiquity in different sections of it are known from antiquity and was finally printed only in the year 1701. So this is the first edition. In this book, there are, as I said, recipes and all kinds of designs of how to make Jewish amulets for different occasions. So here is the typical page from that book that tells you, for example, how you should write some names, like the name Shaddai, and for example, something that everybody knows today, the Star of David, Magen David, but it's really a protective design that is in the book of Raziel is recommended for protection for magical reasons. And one of the items that he gives, the author, and the tradition, of course, that he represents, is to make the shape of a triangle. And he explains, and that's something that's known already from the Talmud, that in the triangle, you take the name of your enemy, you write at the top, and you go and lower it every time you delete one letter or two. And so that's how you decrease the power of the demons. So wearing a triangle on her chest, this woman from Debdu, that's what it means. It's to protect her against evil forces. And by the way, we know that the book of Raziel that was very well known in the Jewish world, in the West and the East, we have amulets for childbirth, whether this one is from Germany or these are from Alsace, and they're in the same design of the triangle. You put it on the crib of the baby to be protected. So these are from the West, from Europe, and these two are from Baghdad. Yes, they are Iraqi Jewish amulets for the same reason, for babies, put on the chest of the baby or on the crib, and they are very well known. And if there are Baghdadis in this audience, they'll immediately identify them. And they are considered to do the good things, and they have many other symbols on them, including the evil eye, the blue eye, against evil eye, or this item that we see here. Let me show you, excuse me. This item that is called Sabayun, 7 eyes. It has 7 eyes, and it's supposed to protect with the color and the number of 7 eyes that are watching. And there is Khamsa, and there is the Afsa, that this item is called for fertility, and so on. So it's a combination of many things that are put together, but the basic shape of the item we saw before is this triangle shape. And by the way, when I traveled some years ago in eastern Turkey, in the Kurdish part of Turkey, near the city of Urfa, So in this village that I visited, every house is in front, above the door, when you enter the house, above the entrance, this kind of beads in the shape of triangle. It's like our mezuzah, yes, to protect those who enter the home. So even when there are no inscriptions, even when these pieces of jewelry look beautiful, magnificent, amazing, and so on, that any woman today would love to wear them, when you look close, you can still see on some of them, of course, familiar motifs of magic that you know even today. You don't have, like the triangle, to go to sources to check. So on these two necklaces that are both from the collection of Mr. Gross, from both are Algerian, Jewish, I mean. And so let's see the detail. So when you look at the detail, so you see the six-pointed star again, the shield of David, and the Khamsas, yes? I mean, and of course, it's beautiful, but you can see, and the other one, the one that we saw on the other side, it's all Khamsas, yes? I mean, all these items that are hanging from the necklace are small Khamsas. Okay? So it's definitely done for the purpose that I'm telling you. Here is another one in the collection of Mr. Gross, and this is done among the Sfaradim of Eretz Israel in the, let's say, late 19th, early 20th century. And this is a necklace that is exceptionally, I should say, is all made of items of protection. Each one has its own symbolic story. So for example, we have the hand. We have the Khamsa, and on it is written Ben Porat Yosef. That is the most important verse for protection among the Jews of Islam. Maybe if I have time, I'll explain why. And it says Yerushalayim, yes, here, Ira Kodesh at the bottom. So Ben Porat Yosef on the Khamsa, and Joseph is the master of the Khamsa, you should know. If we'll have time, we'll talk a little bit about that. So here is the Khamsa. Here are these two, the fish, about which we should talk a little bit also, and the bead, the blue bead, yes, that we see here, also for protection. And here we see a scissor to tear off the power of demons. And here we see a lock, yes? And this is, for example, for a woman that had difficulties in getting pregnant. She did get pregnant, and so that she doesn't lose her baby, this is to lock her womb so that, there's no miscarriage. This lock is for that. So every item here is some function. And the central one here is at the bottom, I'm showing now enlargement of it, is the name of God. All this is done in the name of God. So the name of God is written here Shaddai in the center, and the round is very long name of God that begins all in abbreviation. It's hidden name, Aleph Bet Gimel, Anna Bekoach Gdula Mincha, Tapil Tzora, Kabel Rinat Amcha, and so on. I won't go over all this long name, the Talmudic name of God that is made of many letters, that is considered very good protection on Jewish amulets. So on some of them, it's clearly just the text is written, so there's no question that this is an amulet. Yes, you see again, if you quote from the Bible, that's the best, because these words were given by God to Moses or to David. For example, here, one of the most common, one of the most popular texts on Jewish amulets is this psalm, L'Mnatzeach B'Nginot Mizmor Shir, is written here all in abbreviation. If you read this psalm, you'll see and immediately understand why this is so important and why it's written here. And then here at the bottom is on these leaves, you can say, Kra Satan is calling God to tear or to stop the power of the demons. It's again part of his name, Kabel Rinat Amcha, Sagvenu Tarenu Nora. Not everything you can translate, because these are not really words that are always meaningful even, but the fact that they're used by Chachamim, and by the way, we should not pronounce them and so on, because these are magical secrets, actually. And now, these amulets in the lands of Islam, especially in Kurdistan and Iran have often the names of the people for whom they were made. They were not made to be items exhibited in museums or on display. They were made for something very practical to help that particular woman, especially that she is, the one that is more susceptible to all the harms of our world and so on, whether rape or kidnapped and things like that, and women had to be careful. So on the backside, for example, in Iran, it was very common to write the name of the woman for whom it was made. This we see now the backside of these items, of these amulets. So here you say B'Shem Rochma Bat Rachel. Yes, her name is written here, or Al Shem Rachel Anoledet Min Bijama Tarlat, and you have the date 1879. Yes, so Rachel that was born to Bijama. Yes, that's her name of her mother. And by the way, the name of the mother is written to make sure that she's protected, because the father can be questionable, but the mother we know for sure, and that's considered better. Here is another one, Al Shem Sarah Noledet Min Esther, Sarah that was born to Esther, and the date, you have even the month, Kislev of the year Tafresh Lamed Gimel, which is 1873. So this is the back side. Let's see the front side of this amulet. Here is the front side. And of course, it has again a sound that is written in abbreviation. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. I look at the mountains, from where my help will come, and so on. It's again a sound that speaks about the protection of God. And then it ends, after the citing the sound, it ends with this word, שמרני ועזרני מכל מיני עין רע. Please God, yes, save me and help me of all evil eye and all witchcraft and everything harmful, save me from that. Amen, netzach sela va'ed. Yes, so this is how these are written. So a woman that would wear this Esther that we just saw, she will be able to walk with the feeling of protection, and it's a nice object, as you can see. Sometimes the names are written on the front of the amulet in Iran. Here you have few that Zalika bat Melaim, or here Leah noledet min Sarah, yes, Esther bat Sarah, and so on. And sometimes it would even tell you in the front for what purpose it was done. So here is an amulet, I'm showing just part of it, silver again, for this woman, Eshwar, this is Persian name, daughter Bat Chanom, daughter of Chanom, and it says, בזכות אלה השמות, because of the names that are written above, שלא תפיל את פרי בטנה, that she will not have miscarriage. Yeah, so this was especially we have the story of this particular woman for whom it was made, Eshwar, daughter of Chanom, and only to protect her for miscarriage. Probably she had a miscarriage before, and so the Chacham made her this one so that the next pregnancy will be delivered safely. And by the way, I was able to identify this woman. I found her tombstones in Mount of Olives, this woman that for whom this amulet was made in early 20th century. She died here in Jerusalem. She made Aliyah, Kashwar Bat Chanom, and died in 1945 in Jerusalem. She's buried on Mount of Olives. And see, Ponit Menat Sadeket Akshera, she was considered when she died to be a righteous woman, and probably she got her son, I hope. Anyway, so the other population that needed protection were children. So women in particular, but also children, babies and children. So here we see a wedding of children in Mashhad, in the holy city of Mashhad in Iran, where the Jews were forced to convert to Islam in 1839. And so to protect their children, the Jews made them marry, within the families of this community of Anusim, of forced Muslims at very young age. So we see this bride and bridegroom here at the age of 5 or 6, at least they're engaging, and this is their engagement ceremony. and later they get married. But anyway, children, because of this is just an example of what can happen to children, because a child could be kidnapped, for example, or that the Muslim would come and ask to marry the girl because she is a Muslim, so there's no problem. So, I mean, children needed protection in Yemen, for example. Orphan children can be taken to the imam. So they needed protection more, let's say, than the adults. There was big mortality rate. And for that, and that's one reason. Another one is that the big number of children that died at young age. So families that could would be, let's say, as big as they could. I mean, women would be pregnant all the time in the years that they could, so that they can bear as many children as possible, because not all will stay alive. So it was, of course, fertility is an important principle already in the Bible, and the first commandment in the Bible. So when we look at families from the past, the pictures of families, whether again it's in the shtetl in Eastern Europe or among the Sfaradim or lands of Islam, if the family was lucky, you can say, they would have all their children survive, and that's why we see very big families with the differences between the children are very small between one to the other. There's a Yemenite family just arriving in Israel, or this is, I think, still in Aden before they took the flight. But anyway, you see that the difference between the children is very small. Yes, I mean, they're all, or here today in Israel, I mean, if you're Orthodox families, they continue with that tradition and would have many kids, that there's not much difference between the kids in the age. I mean, of course, you need at least 9 months, but you would strive to that. And of course, as I said, child mortality in the past, we don't have from Islamic lands, but we have from Europe, from the 16th century and on. And you can see that sometimes it reaches 50% of children that would die at a young age. Like by 5 years old, almost 50% in the 16th century, male and female together would only survive. Yes. And I can tell you in my family, of the 12 children that my mother bore in Zaho, in Iraq, before they came to, 6 of them, before they came to Israel, died there. So exactly 50%. Or not died, but one was kidnapped and so on. Everyone has a different story. So children would walk with amulets as well. And that's also something that when we look at pictures, we would see. For example, here, these two, Kurdistan again, we are still in Kurdistan. We see this boy here, is almost 9 or 10, and he's still wearing this amulet. And this is a brother and the sister, and both of them have amulets. Let me show you details of what they wear. So this is what the boy is wearing, this type of amulet. Yes. So it's like this cylinder that we saw before. And the girl, she has the shape of a moon stuck with a wax to her hair. This is called hilal, this item, because the girl was compared to the moon. They have the same cycle of 30 days, and the belief was that they can that the moon can protect her because she is close to the moon. Yes, going back to what I said at the beginning about women and nature. Or here, these two Iraqi boys. These are actually from a learned family from Baghdad in the 1940s. This is the father and uncle, the mother and the uncle of one of my former students. We speak about Baghdad 46, 47, and they are modern family, yes, supposedly, but look how many amulets both the boy and the girl have, yes? And this is what the girl is wearing. This again in the Gross collection, all this necklace with all these amulets. And what she has on her feet and what this baby has on his feet, you see here and here. Even that he's nude, they put still this necklace on him, so he's protected. And these anklets, this item is called ginjil. Ginjil is what Iraqi Jews put on the feet of the babies to protect, because you see the blue eye again, protect the child, and also because the noise they make, because the child walks with this, so the belief is that the noise makes the demon run away or keeps them off the house, and also the mother can follow her child by the noise, of course. So these are these anklets of this type. And in Kurdistan, the child would be also even protected by a sword that he will be wearing. So this you can see in this sword that is called sepa. Of course, the design here is important because you fight with this. It's a weapon, but on this weapon is written names of God. So they would tie it to his turban, like here in this holes that we see here. Okay, maybe the last item I show you, and we maybe about the motifs we'll speak later. Here are two supposedly girls from Yemen, from Sana'a. Okay, so we see how they are typically dressed, but only one is girl. This one is a girl. This is actually a boy. So just to show you, to convince you, I'm showing you the caption below the photograph by the only Jewish photographer of Sana'a, that this is his son, that they dressed him as a girl because a girl is let's say, less in danger in comparison to a boy. Boy was considered very valuable to the family. You know, he has the circumcision, he will work for his family, he will provide for his parents, he won't leave the home when he reaches the age and so on. And so the girls were considered secondary, as everybody knows. So we dress them all, at times as girls, the boys, so that the demons don't take them away. And if you think this is an Islamic tradition only, I want to show this picture, again, of the father of one of my students in Budapest of the 1930s. This is him, and this is him. The two pictures are of the same boy wearing the same shoes. So when something happened in the family, after he was born, they dressed him as a girl so that he's protected. So that Budapest of the 1930s, we have the same phenomenon that we see in Sana'a. Okay, so these were ways in the past to protect in this way that I spoke. Okay, so I think at this moment I should stop because I think we passed the time. And if there are questions on some of the items that I showed, I can go back to the PowerPoint and show you some other items. Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor Sabar. We do have a number of questions, in fact.
Okay.
And one of them, to start with, asked about the color blue and the blue beads, especially that appear more than once. Could you talk about the significance of the color blue?
Okay, so in Judaism, it's very clear because that's the only holy color in Judaism. Yes, we know from the Bible already that the talit has the threads that are done in blue. That was a secret blue. The secret of how to produce it was lost already in Talmudic times. It's, of course, the reason is not so difficult because that's the color of heaven. So people believe that this is a special power, and they believed in that blue is bringing good luck, while other colors can bring bad luck. So every color would have, also in Europe, have its own symbolic values. But blue in Islamic lands and green as well, green especially in Muslim society, was considered very protective. Green because if you live in the desert, everything that is green is considered, fertility and good. And so the color green was also became holy. So both blue and green are considered holy in Islamic countries.
And there's a question about tefillin and the mesusa.
Okay, so let's say anthropologists of the past would suggest, like, for example, I can say one name of a person who wrote a book that's called Jewish Magic and Superstition, Rabbi Trachtenberg, American Reform rabbi. And he claims that the mezuzah is an amulet like any amulet. But already in the Middle Ages, Maimonides, for example, or is the most important person that spoke against this attitude. He said the mezuzah has nothing to do with what the pagans are doing. And in fact, on the mezuzah in the past, in his time or before his time, were written many names of God, like on the amulets that we saw. And he forbade that. In the Mishneh Torah, he specifically comes against this practice and commands to delete all the names written on the back of the mezuzah, names of God that are mystical names, so that people won't refer to this as an amulet. But until today, we know that some rabbis today, even in Israel, say accidents in highways are because the mezuzahs are not written in the correct way. So we have still that tradition, and the same about tefillin. Some people say something happens to you if your tefillin are not good and so on, and they can look like magical objects. And by the way, the verb from kamea, likmoa in Hebrew, to put on your body, is used for tefillin and for an amulet in the Talmudic period. So there is some connection, but of course, from, let's say, the official point of view of religion, of Judaism, there's no connection. There's no connection. So it depends how you look at it.
There is a question about the fish amulet. Could you comment a bit more on that?
Okay, so that was the second half of my lecture when I wanted to speak on the Hansa and the fish. So I'll tell you in briefly. The fish in Islam in general and in Judaism is considered a symbol of fertility and good luck. So in Judaism, it already begins in the Bible. In the Bible, for example, when Jacob is blessing the sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Menashe, he tells them, be like fish, udgu larov bekerev haaretz, multiply like a fish, like the fish, because the fish lays many eggs. So this was taken by later generations, that the fish is symbol of fertility. And in the Talmud, in Tractate Brachot, if you want to go to the text and read it, it says the fish lives under the water and the evil eye cannot penetrate the water. So he is a symbol of protection. He's a symbol of protection and fertility at the same time. So on many ketubot, for example, on many Jewish marriage contracts from Islamic lands, from whether Calcutta and Bombay to Tetuan and Tunis and Jerba and Tiberias and many other places, you see at the top of the ketubah a pair of fish, not because they got married in the month of Adar or because they lived next to a lake, but because the fish is symbol of fertility in the wedding. So the verb about the fish, the fertility of the fish, that the blessing of Jacob, is cited on many ketubot for this reason. And actually, for example, in Morocco, at the wedding, they would throw live fish at the feet of the bride and the bridegroom, a symbol for fertility. So that's the fish was considered because of that, and as a, you know, as a good symbol to be used next to the Hamsa. The Hamsa and the fish together, you can say, are the winning symbols of protection.
There is a question. Yes.
Is of interest about the fish because we are just after Pesach, after Passover. So remember that the Israelites, when they are in the desert, they say to Moses, we remember the fish we ate in Egypt. Open the Bible, if you have with the commentary of Rashi, and see what Rashi says there. Rashi says, they meant we remember how fertile we were in Egypt. They didn't mean the meat of the fish, they meant that we had miraculously be increased and could come out of Egypt with a large number. So we remember the fish, we remember how every woman had 6 babies at once, yes, every pregnancy. Yeah, okay.
There is a question then about to what extent these practices and amulets were brought to Israel, and I believe that's something you'll be talking about next week.
Yes, that's the that's the topic of next week. Some of it, yes. So yeah, so let's leave it for next week, and we'll talk more at length about that.
And what would happen if the amulet didn't provide the protection that was expected? Would
Okay,
it, and
so
would it be buried with the owner when the owner passed away?
okay, so the metal amulets, those that I showed you, survived because they were brought by the immigrants to Israel mostly. Uh, Usually in the past, and they're recent, they're from the late 19th century to our time. In the past, they would be melted down and redone for something else or for an amulet. They were not considered holy objects. They were not considered something to be put in a museum, as I mentioned, but they were functional. So once they finish their function, they can be destroyed and the silver, the metal be used again. So that's how they looked at them. Those who did not function as they were supposed to, people would start to ask, what did we do wrong? I forgot to lit the candles on Friday afternoon at the time. I didn't give tzedakah to that poor person. They would start to ask questions. And we have many stories of that type that even the rabbis were, let's say, the chachamim in Islamic lands were concerned with this question. Just a typical story, again, from Kurdistan. A woman that had a baby that was very sick went to the chacham and asked him for an amulet. So he writes to her the amulet, and she puts it in his pocket and goes back home, very happy that now the baby is protected and so on. So some time passes and the amulet falls on the floor. It was a piece of parchment, and she opens it and nothing is written there. So she goes to the chacham and starts to scream at him, why you cheated me? You didn't write anything there and so on. So he asks her, did it work? Is your son now healthy again? She said, yes. So he said, it worked. So it's okay. So it's really, that's how some Chachamim even looked at it. They felt they have to do it, and they gave, let's say, the feeling for their people, for the community, that this is something that will help them, and it did. We know that even today, I had some statistics that in the Haredi society, problems of pregnancy are less than in the secular society, because if the rabbi is blessing them and they believe that it will help, it does help them. And psychologists can tell you that this also affects how the body functions, and there is something to it.
There is a question also, you mentioned at times is there crossover? How would it work between Islamic practices and Jewish practices in a Middle Eastern country?
They are very, very similar, very similar. I mean, the shape of the amulets, their design and so on, but the texts are different, of course. I mean, while let's say, we use biblical texts and quotations from the Kabbalah and the names of God and angels and so on, they would use their own names, but the design sometimes is you cannot tell if it's Jewish or not. I didn't get to speak about the Khamsa, but the Khamsas in Morocco, it's very difficult to distinguish between Jewish ones and Muslim ones. I mean, they look the same. Only if they have Hebrew or Arabic on them, you would be able to know for sure, or if you know who made them and who used them. Otherwise, they look almost identical. And by the way, also here in the land of Israel, let's say Palestinian amulets of the 19th century look very much like Jewish amulets of that time, of the 19th century Palestine. So the design is the same, and there's a lot of influence between the two cultures. And of course, the Khamsa, everybody knows. So that's the most famous one. The fish as well are very popular. In Morocco and Israel, they are the two countries where the Khamsa is the most popular in the world to this day. So there are big good connections. And another thing that I should mention, often in Morocco, for example, about which I spoke a lot, but also in other countries, Muslims would go to a Moroccan tzaddik to ask for an amulet, because they know that this tzaddik of the Jews is a miracle performer. I recommend for those who are interested, to read the book by Professor Yoram Bilu on Rabbi Yaakov Wazana. He was a folk healer in Morocco, in the Atlas Mountains, and many of his clients were Muslims because they knew his powers, supposedly. So, and the opposite, the sword that they showed you from Kurdistan, they would buy the silver from a Christian silversmith. And so, and the Chacham would write it. So the combination of the two religions was considered very, let's say, good, because you get the protection from all sides, yes? If you are in despair, you need that.
You had mentioned earlier the Rabbi Ben Diwan in Wezan, Morocco.
Yes.
In the Jewish Learning Channel, in the section on Morocco, there is a film about the Hilula, the pilgrimage,
Wow. Okay, good.
and the singing around the tomb.
I should tell you that some years ago, when I took a group to Morocco, and we were at the site of Rabbi Amram, and so my group was mostly American Ashkenazi Jews, and I told them some stories about Rabbi Amram, and I read to them some of his miracles that people told of what happened to them. We have a book that collects all this evidence, and they were very skeptical at the beginning. But then arrived two women, one French, one Israeli, Moroccan, and started to light candles. And they said they came all the way from France and Israel just to visit the tomb. And so our friends started to interview them and ask them, and by the end of our visit, everybody was lighting candles. Everybody, all women especially, but also the men. And they asked me what they should write, what the request to make, how to do it, and so on. So by the end of our visit, everybody became very spiritual.
Yes, of course. It's a powerful experience.
Yeah.
Professor Sabar, thank you so much for this enlightening talk. And in the Q&A and in the chat, there are so many comments of people thanking you for this incredible presentation.
Good. Thank you so much, everybody, and see you next week.